This is Alexa with the Clinicians Atelier and founder of Care Identity, and I'm really excited to have attorney Doris Dike. Let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Doris Dike. I'm a healthcare business and regulatory attorney, as well as a trademark attorney. Have been in the healthcare compliance and regulatory space for over 10 years, working as a compliance officer, then adding trademarks to my business because so many healthcare businesses want to protect their brand.
I wanted to jump in maybe kind of from the beginning. What are some things that you notice when maybe you have someone new starting a practice come on? What are some things that you would typically see that people don't consider? Things that maybe they should be thinking of that they may not be thinking of before they open their practice. And again, our audience is kind of a mix of physicians, doctors, clinicians, and therapists that are opening private pay practices.
So that's a really good question. Say that across the board is just really making sure that they're remaining in compliance with their state laws. So that might be rules around ownership. That might be rules centered around patient privacy. I think that people have general ideas on things, but their ideas center around what their friends did or what they saw a competitor did. And they're, well, that person did it, so it must be legal, when that is not the case. So when we have a client, we try to help them from soup to nuts, kind of resolve and kind of discuss their issues. So we have kind of two approaches with clients. Either they want us to do like one thing, like, oh, I just need you to review a contract, or we have kind of ongoing support that we offer clients. But sometimes like this one thing that you want me to do ends up having us do a bunch of work for you, because once we're talking and we're going through like just your practice, it's like, oh, well, we got to do this, we got to do this, and then we end up doing other things, which is, I guess, good for business. But for us, our biggest goal is to protect providers and business owners, because I'll say on a personal note, my husband is a physician. We have a practice. We've had a practice for almost 8 years now. And there are a lot of things that providers don't know. So, and it can be scary. Let's educate ourselves and let's figure those things out, because if we don't, some of those things can lead to some substantial fines.
Yeah. So there's something that you just said that I've noticed in groups, sometimes people sharing terms and conditions or membership agreements. Tell me a little bit about, is there something you could say, like some of the risks people may be looking into when they're like swapping these or like trying to add in their own information?
I don't think there's necessarily a problem utilizing a template. The issue is if you don't know what it says, right? Like if I use a template and I don't know that I want to add additional things to offer myself protection and it doesn't cover those things, then it's worthless. So there's not necessarily a problem in utilizing a template. There is a problem in making sure that the template is all encompassing for your business. And I think that that's the biggest thing. And some people, they literally don't read it. They're like, oh, Stacy used it and Stacy's had no problem with it. But the template only covers 4 things, and something outside of the template happened. Why didn't we put it there? Well, you didn't hire someone. Or people will use a template from a different industry and try to apply it to what they're doing. It just doesn't work.
No, it's really good. And I appreciate you being honest about that, because it's easy for business to be like, oh, no, that's terrible. I appreciate you saying it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's bad when you don't necessarily read what it is that you are using.
I have a saying is that I don't lie to people. I'm a straight shooter. I shoot from the hip. And I'm not a big believer in reinventing the wheel if it works, but you got to know what it says. And a lot of providers don't. And that's the problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let's go in a little bit. I know you mentioned you do a bit of trademarking, and especially since I specialize in branding and web design for the healthcare industry myself, can you speak a little bit about why would someone even care about that or choose to want to trademark their business name or their logo and such?
I think that people forget in the healthcare space that healthcare business is still a business. And the biggest things for your business are your business name and your business logo, your identifiers. At the end of the day, yes, it's going to be the care that you offer, but as you grow, right, the whole purpose of you starting a business is to grow. It's not going to be you singularly offering that care. You're going to have other people, and then it's going to be the brand is known for offering good care. So we want to protect the brand. Your brand is your calling card, and your brand is your identifier to everyone. So if you have a name that's not protected, what often happens is someone says, oh, that business is doing great. Let me get a similar name so I can confuse the market so that I can send patients that way. So you want to trademark your business so that you can prevent that from happening. And also, if you ever want to sell your business value is the brand. Like if you ever sell your business, you're not going to work in that business, right? Or you might only work for a very short period of time until the sale is complete. Well, if your brand has no value because you haven't protected it, then it's not really worth anything to anybody else. So you want to protect the identifiers that come with you. So just like a musician, like a famous artist protects their name and their brand, or other industries, it's also really pertinent in healthcare as well.
It's quite interesting, actually, that you mentioned if someone wanted to sell their business, because I recently ran into a situation where I was expanding my business and these people in tech were interested in coming in on my business, on this branch I was creating. And I was like, they must see some value in what I'm doing because they were obviously interested. But he said something to me that really, and this was a much older gentleman that works in like helping businesses grow. And he was also an attorney. And he said to me that you need to be able to package your business, that you, even though people see themselves as the business, you need to be able to package your business in order to one day sell it. So what are the assets that that business has? And so you saying that right now reminded me of when he said that to me. It really made me think of that when you made that comment. You need to be able to separate yourself from the entity. Another belly thing that happened to me, the community is pretty small and I have a very photographic memory considering I'm an artist and designer. And I had someone literally copy a client's website in the industry. And I would love your opinion after I tell this story. I did end up having to consult with an attorney. Obviously, there was some copyright infringement that was going on there. And I mean, although flattered that someone liked my work, at the same time, for me, it was upsetting for my client because I created that website custom for that particular client. And the other thing is the attorney I spoke to told me something similar to what you also just said, that someone might want to pick a similar name. Well, they didn't pick a similar name, but the fact that they were pretty much, they even used the same stock images. And I know they didn't have rights to use them, but it was literally like I videoed the website side by side, and it literally looked like a copy and paste, just changing a few things. So the attorney said to me that you need to talk to them because they could confuse the market, because they might think they're affiliated with your client, even though they're in two different states. People need to be aware of when you're creating your website, don't be copying and pasting people's site, especially directly, because it could, like you said, create this confusion that they're affiliated with one another.
So you mentioned two interesting points. First, I want to talk about assets. Trademarks are an asset. So when you sell your business, you want to continue to make money from your business. And if you own the trademark rights of the name of your business and the logo of your business, then you can license the name and logo to another entity. You can even license it to yourself. Like, I am paying, Doris Dike owns DK Law Group. Let's say I trademark the logo. I can license that logo to myself and then force my business to pay me individually every month as a extra expense. Like right now, I have a client who is a healthcare clinic in Austin, and they are licensing their logo and their name to the other nonprofit members of their nonprofit, and they're getting paid. It's an asset. You have to think of it like another stream of revenue, and you need to build that into your business. That's number one. Confusing the market, absolutely. And in the beginning, when somebody's trying to create a similar website, they might think, oh, I like the images, I like the brand, I like that. But what if the other business goes sour? Like it has a bad reputation that you don't even know about. You're sullying your new business with the affiliation with another business. Like that doesn't even make any sense. You don't know that business to be copying their design or anything related to them. So I think that sometimes we're a little short-sighted, and you really don't want to confuse the market because it could be to your detriment as well.
Since we're still on logos, I want to stay on branding and logos. This is going to be a hot topic, and I kind of want to see what you're going to say. But AI, logos created with AI, imagery, trademarking. I personally have done some research, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. I know that there's still no actual laws yet. They're talking about redoing some laws for my own personal research, because right now some people might be DIYing, and that is something I do teach in my course, is how to create a logo with AI, but then how to make changes to that logo through Illustrator, like a actual vector file program. Tell me a little bit about that, because from what I've read is that when you're using AI, it's obviously pulling from the internet multiple types of imagery. So I kind of want to let you kind of go from there.
There are a couple issues. I don't have an issue with anybody using AI. I think that if you are trying to protect your brand and you're taking images from the internet to make the logo, if you are taking the logo from someone else's brand, it's not going to have the protection, and you can be infringing someone else's logo. Like, I had a client who wanted to trademark the logo of like a huge health system in Georgia. I'm like, you can't do that. But they just, either they drove by and saw it and decided to copy, or they just slapped something together that they saw online. If you're going to use AI, because when you're trying to trademark a logo, the USPTO wants you to put every little piece. So like the curve of a hand, like every little piece of that logo, they mark it as a particular design code that you have to put in. So a lot of the elements of your logo are the design of someone else's. It doesn't have the protection anyways. So that's number one. And then just honestly knowing that you have to train AI. AI is not, and that's with ChatGPT or anything. Like, people think that it just works. No, it's you tell it what to do for it to work for you. So if you just say, make this, and you just download it without doing the detailed research as to what it can't have that will copy too many of the elements of someone else, then it wouldn't be advantageous for you. I'm a little on the fence with it. I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but if you don't know how to train it to not include a large amount of elements of someone else's logo, you wouldn't have the protection anyways, and it would be a waste of your time.
Yeah, something I do say in the course, and I know sometimes people are trying to be budget friendly in the beginning. Maybe they can't hire a designer to make a customized website, a customized logo. But I do make a comment. If you wanted to trademark this, you do run the risk that you may not be able to, because we don't really know how similar. Like, yes, there's apps you can check it through, which I provide those tools. And there's also another app that can see how much of it's generated. It actually will tell you what AI made it. Plus, the other copywriting laws that I read was, if it doesn't have human authorship, then you really can't even say it's copywritten, even though you are training the AI, because again, you don't know where the images are pulling from. And so there is, like you said, the risk of how much is actually someone else's or not.
I will say, Alexa, I know that there's websites that can do a search and kind of search other people's stuff. Those are not always accurate, because people do that for the names. Like, there are websites that attorneys use as well. But we always tell our clients that it's not 100%. We're going to do this search, but it's not 100%. There's a cost to trademark, not just hiring an attorney or trying to do it on your own. There is a cost. If you're doing all this and you're not spending the time to detail and look and make that analysis, it really, you're just going to blow your money and blow your cash.
That's a good point. And I do tell people all the time, because I'll look at people's logos. I can tell immediately when they use things like Canva that have copy and paste type logos. And again, because I'm so visual, I see these things and I'm like, that is not a custom logo. And I'm trying to tell people things like Fiverr, you don't know if they're copying and pasting stock vectors. And again, I only know because I've been doing this for 15 years. A person that doesn't look at imagery every single day designing may not know right away that this is from a stock website. And so you're paying $50, $100. Often you have to be careful that you also are running the risk on these cheaper logos that they are using these stock vector images. That's just something people need to think about and consider when they're starting their practice or revamping their website, because sometimes eventually they want to revamp, and you want to make sure the designer you're hiring, you need to really ask these questions, because let's say you do want to hire someone like Doris to help you with your trademark, and then later to come to find out that they took it off a stock website. those are copywritten. You can't use them. You can't trademark it later because it belongs really to the company or somebody else. That's kind of something people don't think about. So what are some things that you notice, maybe some pitfalls? Do people ever come to you and because something happened and now they need you? Or do you think it's more common that people reach out to you before they open? Or do you think people try to open and then they're trying to go backwards, work backwards and be like, oh my gosh, I need an attorney now?
It's both. It's definitely a mix of both. And this is for any attorney. If it's you're coming to them because something exploded, is obviously going to be more expensive, right? So whether it's on the trademarking or on the regulatory side is going to be much more expensive. But on the trademarking side, I mean, I've had people come to me and they get a cease and desist letter from another law firm because those name is the same. And I mean, people can be vicious. I mean, people will send you a cease and desist and it's like a completely different industry. Lawyers are, litigious. I get it. But it is important that when you're starting your business, when you're thinking about the name of your business, that you do talk to someone and say, here are the many names that we're thinking about. And then you understand the risk. Like for us, we kind of do it in kind of a 3-tier approach. Like we have a low risk, a moderate risk, and a high risk. So if I'm doing what I call a clearance search on a name or a logo, I'll say, oh, that's low risk. There, the likelihood of confusion with someone else's name or logo is low. But if I'm moderate or high risk, I'm like, look, you have to put this in writing that you want to proceed with this mark because you are aware that there is a moderate or a high risk that someone could come up and say, it's got elements of our logo or elements of our name. I had a prospective client reach out to me a few years ago, and they had a logo that they used, they DIY'd, and the logo that they used like LegalZoom to trademark. The Red Cross came after them, and the Red Cross was like, no, you need to change it. And they were like freaking out because they'd spent all this money on website and branding and all this stuff. And they were like, what am I going to do? I'm like, well, they're right. And it is a Red Cross. At that point, you got to think about the giant that you're going against. And that's what I'll tell my clients. I'm like, okay, we can pursue this. Or sometimes you just kind of fold your hands and say, you haven't been in business that long. You're just going to eat that cost. Some big businesses will really just murder you in litigation on something like that.
The worst story is I've heard, especially in real estate, there was this real estate agent that was working under this brokerage name for a while. And later they got a cease and desist. They had to redo all of their stuff, redo their whole brokerage. And the lady was like, I trademarked my business. And that's when I originally was like, man, I really need to consider trademarking my own stuff. Because it was never really something I worried too much about. And I think as a small business, that's a total misconception and something that you don't normally think of because you're like, oh, I just want to get something up and going. I just want to start making money. But then here it's saying this DIY story where they made their own logo. And then it was the Red Cross came after them. And that's crazy. And like you said, the amount of money you spend. So there's a saying in Spanish that what comes out cheap comes out more expensive in the end because you're trying to do everything on a lower budget instead of just hiring someone from the beginning to help you set it all up properly. But I get it. Sometimes we're trying to save money and we don't know where to invest. I think that's something I hear from doctors sometimes too. I don't know where to who to pay, who to invest. It comes out to be a lot of costs. It gets a little overwhelming. They don't know where to allocate those funds.
Yeah. And I think to be honest, Alexa, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think that it's what is your risk tolerance? Because some people, they have a very high risk tolerance. They don't care. So when I say that, it's to say is that I have clients who they'll DIY because they're like, whatever, if I have to change it, I'll change it. But then there'll be other clients that I'll have and I'll say, this is a moderate risk or this is a high risk. And they're like, let's go for it. I'm like, okay, don't say that I didn't tell you next year because I'm telling you. So with those clients, I have to literally spell it out. You are consenting. It's a moderate risk or it's a high risk. You're consenting to proceed with this name. And they don't care because they really like that name or they really like this. It could go either way. Business itself is risk. Everything related to business is risk. So, I try not to knock anybody because it is what it is.
I started at 21 and I DIY'd everything. And so I got screwed over one day. And then I was like, oh, maybe I need a contract now because I just trusted everyone I worked with. And then just the risk that's like, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. It's kind of how I started my business. As you mature in business and you get more established, I think that's when you start to really think a little more like, do I want to keep taking this risk or do I want to kind of like solidify things? Now I work with my attorney and I have them check my contracts. And those were things I started doing a couple of years back. But there was many years that I just kind of like, made it work. And I would read everything, and make sure it like aligned. But so, yeah, I'm not judging anyone at all. I mean, I've done it all myself. But I will say now that I've been in business 15 years, there's a lot more I think of now that I would have never thought of in the beginning or didn't even know to think of, to be honest. Let's be honest. Sometimes you're so overwhelmed with the process of starting something. You just started and then you start realizing over time, there's maybe some things you need to start implementing to protect yourself and your business. Tell me a little bit, what are some things that you would tell someone that's opening, or maybe they're already open and they're like listening to this? What are some things that you would say they should be mindful of when they're starting? Is there like a few bullet points that you could share?
Absolutely. Let me just start from the beginning. Like, I think that, again, the whole notion of like, be penny wise and not be pound foolish. Like, I'll say that when my husband and I started his business, we did one of those website companies that you paid like $125 a month to build their website. Now, in the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm just getting started. But now for my own website, for example, I paid the money because I'm like, why would I continue to pay and pay and pay and pay every single month and not own my website and have to be like beholden to someone else versus like, I own my stuff. If I want to make a change, it's easy. So that's one of the things, right? Like having ownership over as much of your business as you can. So that's the name, that's the logo, that's the website. 2, understanding your contracts and your agreements. 3, making sure you have the correct like consent forms for your providers and for your patients and things like that. So there's a myriad of things I can go into, but that's kind of like a quick bulleted list.
I'm going to do just some quick math because I'm such a math person. And you said your husband and you have owned that practice for 8 years, which is 96 months, and 125 is $12,000 over 8 years that was paid. And that's what I try to tell people. Like I have people say, oh, they're going to charge me $2,000, they're going to charge me $1,000, and then they're paying $550 a month, $350 a month. Sit down and do the math because sometimes it looks appealing, but you could pay $5,000 for a brand package and website, and then you own it, like you're saying. Or you can choose to pay over 8, 10, 12, 15 years. And then what really sucks is like when you want to get out of it, now you can't take any of the design because sometimes they won't let you or they won't give you the coding for it. Or they don't want to release the domains. I've heard horrible stories that like companies that don't give people their domains, which is why like I set things up very desperately with our agency. But yeah, I think that's like a really good point. Another thing that you had mentioned earlier was like LegalZoom. I've used LegalZoom to do my LLC for my real estate brokerage, but then I actually hired an attorney to do my Strands of Silver LLC, which is the one I do my branding agency under. And I personally preferred working with the attorney. It was a lot less stressful, and I knew like everything was checked. What are some risks people may run into when they're like using things like LegalZoom, maybe not really knowing exactly how to format? Do you think it's actually fairly easy, not worry about so much hiring an attorney to do the formation with something like LegalZoom? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think LegalZoom has a place for simple businesses. I don't necessarily think or recommend LegalZoom for a healthcare space, only because there's so many regulations related to healthcare businesses. So I think that you're dealing with the generalist attorney for LegalZoom. So I have people come to me when they're trying to start their business and there are ownership issues, like who can own the business based on your state law. Well, if you're going to LegalZoom and you're dealing with the generalist, if it's a simpler type of business, but if you are using a LegalZoom and there are critical things that you need to think about for your business, I don't know if I would trust it. If I was starting a makeup shop or clothing brand, I could use a LegalZoom for that.
For the real estate, it was fairly easy, but for my Strands of Silver, where I've had to use my attorney a lot more for certain things, especially because there's so much creative stuff I have to try to protect. So that's where I definitely have preferred, kind of like you're saying, the regulations. Not that necessarily my design company has regulations, but I do think that's a good point that I wouldn't have thought of. Is it is true. Some states allow you to do certain things that others don't. And if you don't have, you don't even know to ask those questions. And then, like you're saying, you're working with someone that's a generalist, you could be risking things not being formulated or created properly. And I think that's a really good point to bring up, is like, it does help to speak to someone that knows what they're doing and also avoid any potential issues or risks when it comes to actually running the company. Especially like you're saying with healthcare, that's a really great point as well. Are there any other things you would like to share as far as like, is there just like that we can cut this out, but like, is there anything else I haven't thought of that's like a good thing to bring up?
I think just in the healthcare space, especially with a cash-based healthcare business, I think a lot of providers maybe don't think about patient privacy enough. And I think that's really important and really critical. The rules related to HIPAA may or may not be applicable, but patient privacy rules are applicable in every state, like every single state. And I think that sometimes providers just don't think they have to do it, or they don't take it as seriously and they're kind of lax, and then something happens and their patients will let them know real quick that about their rights. So the one thing I'll stress is, just because you have a cash-based business, don't throw everything out the window that you've been taught. Make sure that you're implementing strategies to protect yourself from any type of risk. And in any type of healthcare business, patient privacy is always going to be a risk.
That actually made me think when you said privacy, because I know there's privacy policies. I know that sometimes people on their website, they don't put those, or the clients don't always provide them to me. And so obviously I do the website and they have access to it to add whatever they like to it. But what are some things that you feel are really necessary that people may not be thinking of that need to be on their website to protect themselves?
Making sure that you put some type of notice of privacy practice, just kind of also make sure that, not necessarily on their website, but make sure that anything that needs to be encrypted or protected, that is encrypted and protected, and making sure patients can't necessarily put, like sometimes people have a contact us form and like the patients are putting all this information in. We should avoid people putting like protected information, because if you haven't established that doctor-patient or nurse-patient relationship, we got to eliminate them sending you confidential information. So maybe just phone number, name, and keep it very limited on what they can provide until there's an established relationship between the parties, because you don't want to expose yourself. Because in healthcare, I don't know what it is, there's always some type of data breach. And it's not necessarily the website, it's human error, right? So someone can get a hold of that information, an employee, a former employee, something, and you've now exposed yourself to something that you probably didn't think you would be exposed to. So it's just, I think that it's critically thinking about every piece of your business, your website, how you train your staff, every piece, and like, okay, I got to do what I can to protect the privacy of my patients is going to be critical.
And one last question. I have heard, and I have had clients sometimes ask me about ADA compliance on their website. And I definitely have a widget on my own that I recommend. And I do let people know, as much as we would like to, as designers, to try to think of everything to make sure your site's compliant. The reality is there's so many guidelines that need to be considered, that widgets, that making sure those guidelines are met. I would rather invest in something like that, because there's a lot of changes that are happening. I'm checking it for you. Tell me a little bit, have you seen or have you ever had any clients have any issues with ADA compliance? Is that even something you handle at all?
It is not something that we necessarily handle, but it's something that especially a healthcare organization has to think about. Because, okay, so your patients are going to come. Your patients are going to have some sort of disability. You're a healthcare business. So you want to make sure that your website is readable for them, because they're seeking your services. And they're the ones who are going to complain the quickest. They might not complain on Alexa or my website, but they're sure as heck going to complain on yours, because they're trying to be accessible to you. So I think it's critical that you are having these conversations with your clients. And I also think providers need to think about, okay, if I'm DIYing my website, or I'm spending like $100 or $100 a month on a website, they're not thinking about those things. they don't care. They just get your cash that month that they're gone, where the liability could be substantial for you. And then you also want to leave your patients with a good feeling of doing business with you. If they can't read your website, what are they going to think about the services that you're going to be providing? So first impressions do matter.
Well, I appreciate your time and thank you so much for coming on. If you guys want to get in touch with Doris, are there certain states that you aren't able to work in? Do you work nationally? Can you tell us a little bit of where you're able to provide service?
So I provide services primarily in the state of Texas. I have clients all over the country. I partner with other attorneys in the other states that we do business in. So yeah, we, especially when we're dealing with privacy or any things that are related to federal law, we're really working statewide.
Well, awesome. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I hope you got a lot of value out of today's message. I really wanted to do something a little unique and interview an attorney. Every now and then I'm going to interview some special guests outside of our clinicians, doctors, and therapists that can help you guys along your journey of starting a private pay practice, or also tips on growing or marketing your private pay practice. I recently launched my DIY course. If you're thinking about starting your own practice and doing your website yourself, or if you are interested in partnering with me to build your brand, we can definitely do that as well. And I just launched Sales and Marketing Academy through the Clinicians Atelier. If you haven't joined my free Facebook group already, make sure to join for free if you're a clinician, therapist, or doctor. And I am doing monthly coaching calls, teaching how to grow your business, how to market, and I'm giving a few freebies. You can also download on my website the brand personality ebook as well as my ideal patient ebook. Thank you again for joining today's podcast episode.